If you're recording home, you don't need to mix on analog because the DAW sounds just as good. Mix through Reaper, Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, you name it, it'll rival mixes done on an SSL or even a Neve console. I mean, just listen to this back to back. Hold on a second. Which one of those was the Reaper mix and which was the Neve? So I've got to thank the user James Jones for inspiring this episode. I often get inspired to make videos based on user feedback, and let's just say this one was very inspiring.
I haven't commented on this Neve thing yet, man. Shame on you, Glenn! You preach we don't need $1 million to make music, but what did you do? It doesn't sound any better than analog gear anymore. The differences are so small it is not worth to spend $100,000 on analog gear when you can do the same thing from a $5,000. You were on a video comparing distress and comp from a few different software companies against a real hardware, and the differences were so small you could chalk it up to another compressor, and it's the exact same thing. Even with the same thing set up sounds different from that piece of gear, man. Prestige? Ha 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 ha! Where's the preacher now?
You're absolutely right, James. This was nothing more than a complete total waste of money. A total prestige piece. I mean, there can't possibly be a difference in the results, right? The DAW manufacturers wouldn't be exaggerating, would they? Digital workstations are great, and they've definitely lowered the price of admission and turned on an entire generation of young people to recording. That is certainly incredible. However, I wonder if somewhere along the way, we've lost our way. Rock and metal isn't quite the cultural force it used to be. People stopped buying records and production budgets have all but vanished. And instead of amazing, inspiring performances, we get heavily edited, sanitized pablum that is equally predictable as it is boring. We're far too tempted to fix performances that don't need fixing because human beings are visual creatures. When we took music off the tape decks and mixer boards and put it onto a screen, suddenly we got this urge to make sure everything lines up on the grid. Not because it makes better music, but because it looks better to the engineer. Now, just a note, all the mixes being presented here do have one thing in common. They're all using Element Bass, which is available at Spectre Digital. If you're mixing in a DAW or on a top-of-the-heap analog console, you still need great sounding bass guitar to make your mixes sound awesome. So if you've been asking, dude, what's up with that bass tone? That's Element Bass. Go grab a copy today. Links in the description below. Now, I've been kicking around the idea of getting a console for a long time, mainly because after staring at a screen for the last 26 years, I thought it might be a good idea to try listening to the mix first and looking at it second. And I'll admit, Joel Wanasek's video about him buying an SSL Origin really piqued my interest. Now, what sealed the deal for me was visiting the Neve facility in Burnley, England last year and getting to try out the Genesis Black. It was absolutely mind-blowing, not only in terms of sound, but in convenience as well. So I reached out to my friends at Sweetwater and we made it happen. So I bumped into Joel at NAMM last January and he asked me a very simple question. Do you notice that you're using about 90% less EQ? And I had to agree. The insane thing is, since switching over to the Neve, not only am I using way less EQ than I ever did in Reaper, I'm using way less compression as well. I used to compress the kick, snare, overheads, and toms individually, and then run your crush bus in parallel, and then put them all through a Taylor Magnetismus, which was an analog tape saturation simulator. Now on the Neve, I'm running all the drum channels, as well as the rest of the mix, just to the master bus compressor. That's basically it. No more compressing the shit out of the snare, no more compressing the kick. However, I am using the SSL B dynamics on my overheads in DS mode as they clamp down on some cymbal harshness, and I'm doing about 4 dBs on my master bus with a fast attack and auto release. But that's it as far as compression goes. I've also stopped using plug-in reverbs and found some old Yamaha SPX series verbs instead, which wound up on a lot of my favorite records. You can look for the SPX 90, the 990, and the 2000. They're affordable and amazing. Now, I went with Neve because it's a fully automated console with recall. I use the board not only to mix demo tracks for the show, but to make video content as well. I'll run my monologue mic, which is up here, out to the computer, but to the camera simultaneously. And all I have to do is pull up a config file to change the board over for mixing. And how do the mixes sound? Well, here's the same song mixed in Reaper versus mixed on the Neve. Which is which? You tell me. All right, guys, I got one more song I'd like to shoot out for you. This, I can honestly say, is the best thing I ever did in Reaper. After mixing in digital for 26 years, this was hands down the very best I could do. Let's put it up against the same mix done on the Neve. So I gotta ask, what do you like better in each instance? Let me know in the comments below. Mixes 1 to 4, clip A or clip B. Now this is a double blind test, meaning that even I don't know which mix is which, only my editor does. And I'm genuinely curious to find out which method of mixing the audience prefers just by using their ears. So the whole point of getting the console was to help me get my mixes faster, and that's certainly been true. Once I got over the massive learning curve, that is. Many thanks go out to the team at Sweetwater and their outstanding support, as well as Joe Heaton and Neve, who's been a total champ answering all of my idiotic questions. I'm sure he's facepalmed more than a few times going, "Fuck, Glenn, isn't it obvious?" And that's because working on a console is definitely a different experience than mixing with a mouse. You can make changes much faster and access different parts of the mix simultaneously, and that is a gigantic advantage. Now, so far, I've only recorded guitar cabs and video monologues, and the console really and truly handles everything absolutely incredibly. I can feed different audio levels to my computer and to my camera at the same time, and that's pretty amazing. Now, I've got my first drum session coming up in a couple weeks, and I'm gonna try out a few things, like printing the drum effects on the way in. They have the same board at Hertz Studio in Poland, and those guys work with a lot of the super heavy bands like Behemoth, and that's how they do it there. Apparently, it really saves a lot of grief at mixdown. I'm super excited to try it out, especially printing some of those amazing hardware Neve EQs to the toms. I hope to follow that up with a couple of videos showing you guys the whole process. Should be very cool. But ultimately, the question remains, which mixes did you prefer? Because I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below, and I'll follow up shortly with a reveal of what you guys thought sounded best. Let's do it. It'll rival mixes done on an Essence. Fuck. You name it, it'll rival. Fuck. And I've got to. What happens when I go off script?